Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton Knave. We're doing all of Zappa. I've been dreading this one because today we're doing Thingfish. To put it bluntly, this is my least favourite Zappa album. However, I'm not prepared to commit myself to say it's a bad album. I don't think it is a bad album because it's actually a musical. The aim was to actually get it running on Broadway, which sounds extreme, but apparently at the time Broadway was quite progressive and there were lots of experimental things going on. But as it happened, he didn't manage to raise the funds to do it, but still released the album, which is interesting. I mean, he'd attempted musicals before. There was one called I Was a Teenage Malt Shop, and bits of which we've heard. There was another one called Hunch and Toot. A fair amount of stuff we've heard from that one, but this was the only one where it was actually released as a finished product. It was a triple album. I think its problem is it's a triple concept album, so immediately you compare it to Joe's Garage, and if you compare it to Joe's Garage on those terms, it's dreadful by comparison. There's very little music on it, it's all dialogue, etc, etc. I don't think that's fair. I think, to be honest, because it's intended as a musical, it's a different thing altogether, and I know nothing about musicals, no interest in that at all, so it's not for me to judge really. And I get the impression there's a bit of a reappraisal that other people hated it at the time, partially because he'd reused some material that, it's actually quite good, but I don't like it at all, really. There's very little on there that I would actually like, which is quite extreme for a Zappa album. I tend to like all of it. The inspiration for Thingfish is part of Frank's conspiracy theories. It's interesting calling things conspiracy theories. I think you call something a conspiracy theory, it disarms it. It's a way of disarming a point of view. But it is a theory of people conspiring, so it's a conspiracy theory. Frank believed that the government had manufactured AIDS deliberately to attack sections of the population, obviously, who were not subservient to the way of life they wanted. There are many people who believe that. Whether the technology was there to do that at the time is the question, but we're not going to talk about that. And there's other things that happened. Obviously, it is documented that the American government experimented on black citizens. Actually, it was specifically black citizens they were experimenting on with syphilis. They did some experiments in a prison on black inmates, and much more controversially, they did an experiment in 1932, starting in 1932, in a small village of black people on 400 black men, where they were giving them syphilis deliberately and didn't even tell them. Controversial. So all this stuff was happening in America. So obviously Frank's going to be parodying that stuff. He's big on the paranoia of organisations, whether it's religion or whatever. He's not going to like that kind of thing. There was genuinely an army manual that talked about ethnic cleansing weapons. Ethnic weapons. And there was supposedly an unnamed senator once. There was a Senate hearing where he was asking about developing a virus to attack the immune system. So, these things, if you put these things together, you can make what you will of them. And, you put into that mix Frank's attitudes about the extreme end of religion makes for terrifying ideas. So he made this album, and it's about the government experimenting on a prison population, developing a virus to get rid of highly rhythmic individuals and sissy boys. Backfires, and it creates these mutants from the black population of the prisons called Mammy nuns. And Ike Willis had developed this sort of weird dialect, of sort of black parody dialect, which apparently comes from a 19th century poet called Paul Laurence Dunbar. Apparently Frank hadn't heard of, but Ike was pushing for this, and they ended up using it on the album. It makes it very crass, very tasteless. It means the sort of tone of the album, what it's saying is there's something a bit off there with him using that voice and stuff. It just doesn't feel good. It was developed over a period of 2 years, so actually Valley Girl, the riff to that was developed while they were doing Thingfish, so it was developed over a very long time. The script was sort of changed over time as they recorded songs, and it kind of shows, I think. But yeah, so the idea is this prison population gets mutated into these mammy nuns with lips like a duck and head like a potato, and I think they wear gingham dresses as well. And added to this for some reason is two members of the audience in the theatre, Harry and Rhonda, who've got a relationship, although Harry's actually gay and Rhonda is, I believe, a sex doll. Perhaps her alter ego is a sex doll, I'm not quite sure, I don't really get. And that's only for business purposes, I think. And then the story just quickly degenerates into random sex stuff, which, and there's a lot of tracks which are just dialogue with the band playing in the background. It's back to this horrible production. After all these great albums, there's a whole lot of albums here with fantastic production. We're back to this. Sounds like the band's playing next door. And obviously what it is, of course, is you need to hear the dialogue because it's a story, but it means you can't hear the music. At the end of the story, Rhonda turns into this feminist caricature of a businesswoman with a briefcase, which is terrifying for dumb men. And then she has sex with the briefcase and random stuff. And supposedly, a woman heard a test pressing of this at the RCA Records and complained, and they refused to issue it because it was disgusting. You still had the real Mary Whitehouse characters in those days. Right, track 1 is Prologue. It starts with a really cool riff and you think, oh, this is going to be good. And then it's just dialogue over the riff, so meh. Track 2 is the Mammy Nuns. This is a really good riff, actually. Musically, this is great, and but there is the Mammy anthem, which is performed live, which is a guitar solo over these cool riffs, which is much better than all this dialogue spoken over it. And bits of Ike singing the riff as well. Track 3 is Harry and Rhonda, introducing Harry and Rhonda. It's just some very, very bland Synclavier stuff with dialogue. Track 4, Galoot Up-Date. It's a funky riff, but again, it's Ike just talking basically. I mean, that's 5 minutes. Then we have the Torchum Never Stops, 10 minutes. It's the Torchum Never Stops, it's a new version of that. Not my favourite version of it, lots of talking over it. Stick to the live versions of that one. Obviously, it's a classic song though. But that does feature Napoleon Murphy Brock. He's actually back for this, briefly. He was back in the band in the mid-80s. The next song, That Evil Prince, which is dialogue. Track 7, You Are What You Is. Brilliant song. I think it's actually the same recording from the album You Are What You Is, but it is a great piece of music. So I can see why people would have been disappointed at the time if they'd already got the album You Are What You Is, and the best stuff on it they've already got. But it's a great track. Track 8 is Mud Club. Again, we've heard that one before as well, from You Are What You Is. Great, great bit of vocals from Ray White. He's soulful singing. There's lots of dialogue on it again, so I'd rather hear the original. Track 9 is The Meek Shall Inherit Nothing. Yet another track from You Are What You Is. And it's kind of ruined by the talking over it, to be honest. Track 10, Clowns on Velvet. There's some interesting music on here. It is dialogue, but there's some interesting music which has to fade so we can hear the dialogue. But I'll try to listen to the music underneath because there's some fairly interesting stuff going on there. Then you've got Harry as a Boy, which is dialogue. Then you've got He's So Gay. It's a catchy parody of 80s music. Much better live. It is what it is. 13 is The Massive Improvalence, or The Massive Improve apostrophe lens, which is 5 minutes of talking. Track 14, Artificial Rhonda, which is the caricature version of Rhonda, I think. It's Miss Pinky, which is a cool riff, and in the context of this album, to be honest, is a relief to hear something good, although I'm not a massive fan of it on Due to Laws. Then we go on to part 2 of the story. The first song, The Crabgrass Baby, which is quite interesting. It's quite an interesting track. He's using a card in his PC for speech synthesis. Sounds really tame now, but this is only released in '84, probably done before that, so that was cutting edge stuff at the time. But musically, it's quite interesting. Quite a slow song with some drawn out vocals. Then we got The White Boy Troubles. Pretty good, I don't know what you call it, a gospel-y railroad song, lots of vocals. Pretty good. Then we got No Not Now. No Not Now was the first track on Drowning Witch. In the context of Drowning Witch, it's a mess song with some cool bass. Here it's a relief because it's really good in the context of this album. Then we got Briefcase Boogie, which is a load of dialogue and all sorts of stuff happening involving briefcases. Lovely. Then we have Brown Moses, another sort of very vocal piece, forgettable to be honest. Then Wistful Wit A Fist-Full, actually a pretty cool trad jazz club song with some piano. Pretty good. Then track 7 is Drop Dead. That's nearly 8 minutes of dialogue just to close off the story, and the album ends on One Ton On, which is vocals by Napoleon Murphy Brock, interestingly, except it seems to have recorded in reverse. So it's playing the right melody, and they've actually recorded it in reverse to make it sound weird, which is quite interesting. That's another highlight. But overall, going through the tracks like that, you see how much of it is dialogue. So I'm missing the point of it. It's quite clear that it's not intended to be an album like Joe's Garage is an album, but it's just not for me. But there you go. That's Thingfish. Glad I got through that. See you next time.